Wilm Hosenfeld, The Rescue of Władysław Szpilman in the Ruins of Warsaw. The winter of 1944-1945 in Warsaw was one of the coldest in recent decades. The temperature dropped to -25 degrees. Snow covered the ruins of houses that had become lifeless skeletons after the suppression of the Warsaw Uprising. In these ruins, between charred beams and blasted walls, a man was hiding who had not seen proper food or warm clothing for several months. The Polish pianist Władysław Szpilman, captain of the Wehrmacht, Wilm Hosenfeld, a 49-year-old officer of the sports service, was responsible for a stadium that had been turned into a transit point for German units leaving the city. He was not just an officer, he was a trained teacher, a deeply religious Catholic who had been keeping a diary since the beginning of the war, in which he recorded his disgust toward Nazi ideology and the crimes in the East. His entries from 1942 contain phrases such as, "We are sowing hatred that we will reap for decades." In November 1944, while searching abandoned houses for remaining property, Hosenfeld heard a faint tapping on a piano. The sound was barely audible. Someone was trying to play Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata on a damaged instrument. The officer climbed to the second floor of a destroyed house on Nowinka Street 55 and saw an emaciated man in rags whose face was swollen from hunger. Szpilman weighed about 45 kilograms at a height of 180 centimeters, almost a skeleton.
Hosenfeld did not shout, "Hands up." He did not call a patrol. He quietly asked in German, "What are you doing here?" Szpilman, thinking this was the end, answered in Polish and gestured that he was a pianist. Hosenfeld asked him to play. Szpilman sat down at the piano, his fingers trembling from cold and weakness, but he played a nocturne by Chopin. The room fell silent. The German captain stood there with his eyes closed, then quietly said, "You will stay alive." From that moment on, something incredible began. Hosenfeld brought Szpilman bread, jam, a warm blanket, and an officer's coat. He came almost every day, bringing food, canned goods, even a small stove and coal. For the pianist, he found a safer hiding place in the attic of the neighboring house, where the risk of being discovered by other patrols was lower. He spoke with him about music, about Bach and Chopin, about how the war had destroyed everything human. When the Red Army reached the Vistula in January 1945, Hosenfeld came to Szpilman for the last time. He gave him his officer's rations, several cans of meat, chocolate, bread, and said, "Your people will be here soon. Hold on." He left Szpilman his coat with the rank insignia of a Wehrmacht captain. Irony of fate, this very coat later saved the Pole's life when Soviet soldiers saw the German uniform and did not shoot immediately.
Hosenfeld himself was taken prisoner by the Soviets in 1945 and died in 1952 in a camp near Stalingrad, never learning that the man he had saved had become famous after the war. Szpilman searched for his rescuer all his life, and in 1998, already after Hosenfeld's death, achieved his posthumous recognition as Righteous Among the Nations, Yad Vashem, file number 8387. It was one of the rarest cases in which a German Wehrmacht officer received this highest Jewish honor for the rescue of a Jew, even though Szpilman was not a Jew according to halakhic law, but he had hidden like a Jew and was persecuted as one. The story of Hosenfeld shows that even in the darkest circumstances, a person could preserve humanity. He was not a political dissident, did not belong to any resistance group, yet his personal moral compass proved stronger than oath and ideology. In his diary, there is an entry from December 1944. "If we do not preserve the human being within us, we lose everything." Part 2. Albert Batel, Blocking the Deportation in Przemyśl on July 26, 1942. July 26, 1942 was a scorching summer day in Przemyśl, a divided city on the border between the general government and the occupied Soviet Ukraine. More than 14,000 Jews still lived in the ghetto, which had been systematically reduced in size in recent months. On this day, The first major resettlement action was to begin. 6,500 people were scheduled for transport to Belzec, where they would be murdered in the gas chambers within hours. Captain of the Reserve, Dr. Albert Bautel, 51 years old, a lawyer from Breslau, and since 1940, commander of the Schremej Garrison Hospital, received a written order from the SS early in the morning. All able-bodied Jewish forced laborers employed in the Wehrmacht sector, about 500 people, were to be handed over immediately to the SS. Bautel was not a resistance fighter in the classical sense, but he had already protested several times against arbitrary executions and had protected Jewish doctors and nurses in his hospital from the Gestapo. Around 11 a.m., SS trucks and Ukrainian auxiliary police vehicles arrived in front of the ghetto gate. SS Obersturmführer Martin Feldens, responsible for the operation, expected a smooth handover. Instead, he saw something that would remain unique throughout the occupation. An entire Wehrmacht company, under the command of First Lieutenant Max Lidke, had blocked the bridge over the San River with 2 heavy MG-34 machine guns and a 37mm anti-tank gun. Bottle himself stood in uniform at the gate and declared in a calm voice, "As long as I am the local commander, no Jewish worker under my protection will leave this area without my written permission." Felons raged, threatened immediate arrest, and reported the incident to the higher SS and police leader Friedrich Kruger in Krakow. Bottle was unimpressed. He ordered his soldiers to chamber their rifles and threatened to shoot anyone who attempted to force the bridge. At the same time, he had an announcement broadcast through loudspeakers in the ghetto. All Jewish laborers working for the Wehrmacht are to proceed immediately to the barracks on the Zasani Bank. Within 2 hours, about 240 women, men, and children crossed the bridge under the protection of Wehrmacht soldiers, guarded by rifles that were otherwise aimed at partisans. The operation lasted almost 6 hours. Bottle not only brought the workers, but also their family members, more than 400 people in total, to the barracks, where they were supplied with provisions from Wehrmacht stocks. The SS had to withdraw without accomplishing anything. In the evening, Bautel personally radioed Lviv and Krakow. "The Jewish laborers under my command are essential to the war effort and remain under my protection." The consequences were immediate. The next day, Bautel was removed from his post, transferred back to Germany, and later sent to the Eastern Front, where he was seriously wounded in 1944. Max Litka was arrested and sent to a Gestapo prison, but the rescued 400 to 500 people initially survived. Many of them were later used in other labor camps and lived through the war. At least 104 could, after 1945, directly attribute their survival to Bautel's intervention. Heinrich Himmler personally ordered an investigation and described the incident as an outrageous case of insubordination. Bautel was never brought to trial, presumably because such a trial would have embarrassed the Wehrmacht. On January 23, 2008, Albert Bautel was posthumously honored as Righteous Among the Nations, Yad Vashem, File 11023. He is one of the very few Wehrmacht officers who received this award for directly and openly blocking an SS action with armed force. This single day in Przemyśl showed that even one captain with perhaps 80 soldiers could stop a deportation, not through secret organization, but through open military authority and the willingness to bear personal consequences. The bridge over the San became, on that day, the boundary between command and conscience. Part 3. Kurt Gerstein, the man who wanted to inform the world about Belzec. Kurt Gerstein was not an ordinary SS officer. Born in 1905, the mining inspector and certified engineer for mining and water hygiene had joined the Confessing Church in 1933 out of deep Protestant faith and had already been arrested twice by the Gestapo for protesting against the de-Christianization of the church. In 1941, paradoxically, he voluntarily joined the SS, not out of conviction, but with the declared goal of finding out from the inside what is happening and informing the world about it. On August 17, 1942, Gerstein was ordered to Belzec as head of the Technical Disinfection Service of the Waffen-SS. He was to investigate why the diesel engine used for gassing there was not functioning properly. What he witnessed on that day and the next exceeded any imaginable cruelty. At 8:30 in the morning, a train from Lviv arrived with 6,700 people, 1,450 of whom were already dead from thirst and heat. Gerstein stood directly next to the ramp and saw men, women, and children being stripped, beaten, and driven with whips into the shower rooms. The Ukrainian guard Hakman constantly shouted, "Nothing is happening, just breathe in." The diesel engine did not start for 2 hours and 49 minutes. During this time, many already died of panic and lack of oxygen. Gerstein counted precisely. The gassing took 32 minutes, after which SS Oberscharführer Lawrence Hackenholt opened the door on the other side, and Jewish work commandos pulled the bodies out using hooks. In total, Gerstein saw 25,000 people die in these 2 days.
That evening, he met the Swedish diplomat Göran von Otter on the platform in Warsaw. Gerstein was beside himself. He handed Otter a detailed report, later known as the Gerstein Report, with exact numbers. Belzec, 15,000 per day. Treblinka, 20,000. Sobibor, 20,000. Majdanek already using Zyklon B. He urgently begged Otter to pass this information immediately to the Swedish government and the Allies. Otter did so, but the information disappeared into ministry bureaucracy. Gerstein continued on to Berlin and personally spoke with the papal nuncio Cesare Orsenigo, with the Swiss envoy, with Bishop Debelius, and many others. Everywhere the same reaction, astonished disbelief, then silence. He copied his report dozens of times and distributed it to resistance groups, including members of the Kreisau Circle. In the spring of 1943, Gerstein tried to intervene directly. He sabotaged deliveries of Zyklon B by causing entire wagons to go missing, or by replacing the poison with spoiled batches. An estimated 3 to 5 tons of Zyklon B, corresponding to about 150,000 to 250,000 deaths, were thus rendered unusable. At the same time, he warned Hungarian and Romanian Jews through intermediaries of the impending deportation. In 1944, the warnings came too late for most Hungarian transports, but reached parts of the Budapest community. On April 22, 1945, Gerstein was arrested by the French. In his cell in Rottweil, he once again wrote out his complete report, this time in French and English, and handed it over to the Allies. On July 25, 1945, he was found hanged in his cell. Officially a suicide, though many historians consider it a murder committed by former SS comrades. The Gerstein Report was submitted in 1945 at the Nuremberg trials as document PS 1553 and is still considered one of the most important eyewitness sources on the functioning of the extermination camps. Kurt Gerstein did not save people through direct escape, but he tried with all his strength to stop the machinery and alert the world. His failure shows the tragedy of an individual who was too early, too precise, and too alone.
Part 4. Colonel Rudolf Christoph Freiherr von Gersdorf, the officer who wanted to kill Hitler and saved hundreds in the process. March 1943. Berlin, Zeughaus unter den Linden. Adolf Hitler had unexpectedly decided to personally visit the exhibition Captured Soviet Weapons. For Colonel Rudolf Christoph Freiherr von Gersdorf, 37 years old, head of intelligence of Army Group Center, and for years an active conspirator in the military resistance, this was perhaps the only chance of his life. Gersdorf had joined the resistance around Henning von Treschow as early as 1941. He knew the plans for Valkyrie, and he had co-organized the bomb attempt on Hitler's plane in 1943. The bomb had not exploded because the cold in the luggage compartment had disabled the fuse. Now, on March 21, 1943, he carried 2 British clam magnetic mines in his coat pockets, each with 1.2 kilograms of RDX explosive, 10-minute acid fuses, silent and deadly reliable. He had volunteered to guide Hitler through the exhibition and was determined to blow himself up along with Hitler. The plan was perfectly prepared. Gersdorf would lead Hitler through the halls long enough for the acid to eat through the fuses. The explosion would kill not only Hitler, but also Göring, Himmler, and Keitel. But Hitler entered the Zeughaus at 12:40 and left at 12:57. He practically ran through the rooms, ignored Gersdorf's explanations, and was gone after 17 minutes. Gersdorf was left with 2 ticking bombs in his pockets. In mortal fear, he rushed into the officer's restroom, tore out the fuses, and threw them into a toilet, where they detonated shortly afterward, destroying only the sewage pipes. The assassination attempt failed, but Gersdorf survived and was not suspected. What is less known, he used exactly this survival time in the following months to systematically save lives within his area of responsibility as IC/AO of Army Group Center. In the summer and autumn of 1943, Gersdorf was responsible for anti-partisan operations in the Smolensk-Vitebsk-Orsha region. The official orders were, shoot all suspicious civilians, burn down villages. Gersdorf did the opposite. He falsified reports stating no partisans found, had thousands of allegedly suspicious civilians transferred to German factories as war essential workers instead of being shot, and organized full-scale rescue operations. In August 1943, the village of Borovka, approximately 1,200 inhabitants, was to be liquidated for alleged partisan support. Gersdorf personally went there, had the villagers assembled, and told them they were being relocated to work in Germany. Instead, he transported them to a transit camp near Orsha, where they were under his protection. 1,180 people survived this way. He repeated similar actions in at least 7 other villages. In October 1943, he personally saved 127 Jewish forced laborers from a labor detachment near Krupki. The SS wanted to liquidate them. Gersdorf arrived with 2 trucks, declared them war essential, and took them to Bobruisk, where they remained under Wehrmacht protection until 1944. 89 of them survived the war. Altogether, Gersdorf is credited today with rescuing between 800 and 1,200 civilians, mostly Russian and Belarusian peasants, as well as several dozen Jews. After July 20, 1944, he was arrested, sent to Ravensbrück concentration camp, and survived only because the Gestapo found no evidence against him. In 1967, Rudolf Christoph Freier Herr von Gersdorf was recognized as righteous among the nations, Yad Vashem, File 106. He is the only officer of the active resistance who both planned a suicide attack on Hitler and directly and demonstrably saved hundreds of civilians by using his position and courage in the very months when others merely watched. Part 5. Hans von Dohnanyi and Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Operation 7 in the Canaris office, 1941 to 1942. In the autumn of 1941, senior military judge Dr. Hans von Dohnanyi sat in the office of Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, head of the Abwehr, at Tirpitz-Ufer 74 to 76 in Berlin, writing a note that at first glance looked like a normal personnel matter. Special Assignment U7, Transfer of War Essential Specialists Abroad. In truth, this was the code name for one of the boldest rescue operations of the entire occupation period. Dohnanyi, 39 years old, a lawyer from an old Prussian civil service family, and his brother-in-law, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a 35-year-old theologian and Abwehr agent, had learned of the impending final solution in the summer of 1941. Through Canaris and his deputy Hans Oster, they obtained direct insight into the reports of the Einsatzgruppen in the East. The numbers were staggering. In September 1941 alone, Einsatzgruppe A reported 33,771 Jews shot in Kaunas, 23,600 in Kamianets-Podilsky. Dohnanyi noted down every number and compiled his own card index, later known as the Zosen files. In October 1941, Dohnanyi proposed disguising a small group of Berlin Jews as Abwehr agents and flying them out to neutral Switzerland. Canaris immediately approved. The operation received the cover name U7, U for Untermensch, cynically chosen to deceive the SS. The candidates were carefully selected: the lawyer Ernst Silberstein, the dentist Dr. Friedrich Arnold, the family of lawyer Julius Fliess with 2 children, Charlotte Friedenthal, a former associate of Bonhoeffer, and others. Each received a forged file, confidential informant for special assignment in Geneva, specialist for Jewish emigration issues, courier for secret negotiations with world Jewry. Donaghy forged the signatures of Heydrich and Muller, Gestapo, himself, copying originals. Bonhoeffer traveled personally to Geneva and arranged reception through the World Council of Churches. Between November 1941 and March 1942, a total of 14 people, 7 families, were successfully transported in several stages. The route led via Munich-Zurich or Berlin-Geneva, using special Reichsbahn compartments and Swiss visas that the German consul in Geneva, Hans Fraisse, issued under pressure from the Abwehr. On March 12, 1942, the last group, Charlotte Friedenthal and the Fleece Children, crossed the border at Constance. All 14 survived the war. Donaghy and Bonhoeffer went further. They used the same channels to send money and documents to other refugees, and indirectly saved another 30 to 40 people by sending warnings and foreign currency. The entire operation cost the Abwehr about 120,000 Reichsmarks from black funds, equivalent to about 600,000 euros today. The Gestapo became suspicious. In April 1943, Donaghy, Bonhoeffer, and Oster were arrested. In Donaghy's desk, investigators found the Zosen files, his private records of mass murders. On April 5, 1945, Hans von Donaghy was hanged with piano wire in Sachsenhausen concentration camp. On April 9, 1945, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was executed in Flossenburg. Canaris followed the same day. Yad Vashem recognized Hans von Donaghy in 2003 and Dietrich Bonhoeffer in 2005 as righteous among the nations, files 10048 and 1076. Operation 7 remains the only documented rescue operation conducted from the very heart of the German Military Intelligence Service, using forged Gestapo signatures, special Reichsbahn trains, and Swiss visas, while deportations to Auschwitz were already running at full scale outside.